Can there be a commensality of Nietzsche and Heidegger in the analysis of Dugin with respect to Carl Schmitt? So it's an issue that's fascinatingly sort of slipping away from all the current analysis of the world situation, is that what I'm calling the whitest abyss of Nietzsche. And what I'm understanding this as is it's the moment when one is faced with something like the problem Nietzsche cites in his Nietszche and Nachteil der Historie für das Leben, in his work on the uses and abuses of history, as it's usually translated. He says there has to be some kind of selection here. So I just it doesn't matter that it's anachronistic, so-called. Let's say for Nietzsche, there were 4 million peer-reviewed articles written every year in the sciences, in all kinds of fields. 4 million, maybe 5 million articles, peer-reviewed articles written every year. When you have this extraordinary, not just as it's usually thematized in this type of Heidegger context, the special problem of specialization. Everybody's in their own cubbyhole, and they can't know what everybody else is doing, even though it's of some importance. And it might be, under other conditions, a self-respecting individual would want to know about all these things because they're all in some way worthy contributions within certain limits to knowledge. The problem of specialization. Nobody can know everything that's being known. But there's another problem. It's like, what does it mean when there's too many ramifications, when there's too much cascading going on all at once? So that this is what started, the vision of this I'm starting to call the whitest abyss. And it corresponds to experiences one has quite often. When one considers all of these problems, then one sees there's totally legitimate tracks of research in different directions. So, like, for instance, and again, I'm just ignoring sort of anachronism. The Romans basically contemned the Greek things, even though speaking Greek was like a prestige language for the Romans. But nonetheless, they thought, we're not actually going to teach our engineers this Pythagorean cult. We're going to, they know about it, it's not totally hidden, but it's like the gravity of the frown on it is sort of eternal for the ancient Romans. They don't really want to go too far into the questions about the square root of -2 and all this type of stuff. They forbid it, basically. I mean, it's like not absolutely forbidden, but it's in practice, it doesn't have that much traction. They don't. It's not the way they go. But you could imagine mores in all kinds of different directions like this, right? And then if you state it very generically, it's like every society furthers certain pursuits and stomps out other pursuits, in effect. Within this type of skepticism, which is both one that sees so many problems and sees so many directions, and said, okay, I could try to solve it this way, I could try to solve it that way. There's all kinds of ways to do it. If you're Einstein, then you create the theory of relativity in order to continue the problem of trying to set all of reality on one principle and stick to that, a version of the theory of a thing in itself as the thing which is especially connected to gravitation, the mystery of gravitation. Yeah, and then the point of Nietzsche here is sort of like, he doesn't just say, oh, now I'm going to be a skeptic, or now I'm going to be spiritual or something, and be a mystic and be all above it, like he attributes to Leopardi. But he says rather, what's this thing about like the eternal repetition? So I think he sets against the eternal repetition the version that no, there's this Hegelian progress, in a way, pseudo-Hegelian progress, which corresponds to the Christian or Catholic version of progress. We're to talk about having the woke pope and stuff. But there's a longer history of it, right? Because the Catholics were not Jesus himself. Jesus himself didn't. He spoke about sin as enslaving us, but he didn't really actually speak about emancipating slaves. But at some point, the church started being against slavery, and then they were happy when slavery was abolished, and then they considered that this has been in a certain way de facto advance in the sort of way society, the ergon of society, the work of society, the operations of society. But Nietzsche's point is then, like, do you just continue living this way and say this is the baseline? So slavery has been abolished, but then do you want to just continue eternally living this way, or isn't that you cite other inequitous things happening, and you also want to awaken the sense that this is there's a guilty conscience here, in the same sense that the antebellum Southerners, a lot of them sort of knew, like, there's a lot of outside pressure. It wasn't like they were in a monoculture or something. It's like they were hearing things from the French and so on. In this respect, let me try to link this up and tie it into what Dugin's claiming. So I think Dugin tries to make a claim that we could understand Schmitt as being concerned with interest, and then sort of and then set that off against the people that still talked about good and evil, or and this he regards as morality and telos. The problem is, however, Dugin tries to act like Hobbes is doesn't have an answer to the old Platonic type of questions about, like, the what it is questions. The T Estein dikaiosine, T Estein dikaiosine. What is justice in the Politeia, for instance. Or what is courage in the Locus, for instance. But this type of questions lead to the question, what is the good life? Aristotle is talking about the EU zine or so, something like EU in the sense of utopia. But rather, here the second word is some form of zoon or something like animal life, the good life. So Hobbes has an answer. Hobbes has an answer to that. It's not like Hobbes doesn't have an answer to that. He says the way to get to the good life is you start with, I know Hobbes specifically says no, there's not a teleological cause here, but what does he mean by that? He means, and this is a subject where I think Strauss is talking against Dugin in this sense. Strauss's point is Hobbes totally has an answer to Plato and totally plays by the way Plato plays, but he just sort of lowers the way of doing it. He says the answer is you have the state have the purpose. Its only telos is to preserve the life of the citizens. It's self-preservation of the citizens. If it doesn't improve your chances of self-preservation, then you turn your back on the state. I mean, that's obvious from Hobbes' own life. He fled when Cromwell was running riot or whatever. He fled to the continent or whatever. And Hobbes didn't care that much about England as England, obviously. So, you have the American version of Hobbes is basically what people like Jefferson and that's what I was talking about, in contact with the French. Like Jefferson is embarrassed because he knows that, Lafayette, whoever, his French friends are absolutely against slavery and so on. I think they still maybe had slavery at the time. I don't know when the French had released the slaves, and then Napoleon even tried to massacre the Haitians, but whatever. But the people that, Thomas Jefferson was hanging out with were more enlightened or what have you. So yeah, I think Epstein's right. It's that the reason they didn't use Locke's formula in the same way. I mean, it's important to mention Locke also because Dugin says Locke is the key to understanding liberalism. And then you could see a direct connection to Locke, Adam Smith, and Marx, and so on. But because they all interpret the good from coming from things like keeping the Strait of Hormuz open, which then Ursula von der Leyen says contributes to the indivisibility of defense, because all the what happens in the Strait of Hormuz affects the factories in Belgium and so on. This type of way of seeing things as everything is about economics and labor is sort of the built into the Lockean formula, right? But then what Jefferson and I think Franklin especially are interested in introducing is something like there's no art law without, how does it go? There's an old Latin tag that Samuel Moyne uses. It's like leges sine moribus, leges sine moribus, laws without mores are wane, are vain or fake, are useless, sort of. I think that's a good way to link it up, actually, to what Nietszche and Schmitt are saying, is they're useless. It's not Nutzen, not useful, not Nutzen. So yeah, then there's this question of, what are the right mores? And then the pursuit of happiness is supposed to be, according to Franklin and Jefferson and some others, to consist of this searching for the right mores. And then they give like all these lists of things, like always study. They don't say like Marx says, Marx gives that funny list of painting in the evening or whatever, raising cattle in the afternoon or something. But they say something more like you'd expect a classical scholar to spend their day doing, and then they say, then in the evening we take a light amusement by reading Shakespeare or something like that, and some more or less frivolous texts like Shakespeare, because during the day they're reading politics and history and their various regime of ancient Roman authors and so on, and this is their idea of the pursuit of happiness. But it's supposed to perfect the mores, right? So this could be added, and it's compatible with the Hobbesian view that the state is meant to be limited. It's meant to be what Thomas Paine says, necessary evil, because it's meant to only, although that was sort of amended by Andrew Jackson, is that this state, as long as it, reigns its patterns of weather equally on the rich and poor, is not an evil at all. This, by the way, is the Elon Musk vision, which it was thoroughly denounced by Amy Goodman this morning, but I'm not totally convinced, because it's like, just like Zizek makes this lie and says, oh, there's no positive vision of the future, it's all the vision of some kind of apocalypse. Actually, there's like lots of people, like this Ian Banks guy that Elon Musk is into. I think he died a number of years ago, but he produced a large number of novels. He just presents this sort of utopian vision of a technological future, just like Star Trek: The Next Generation. As we mentioned in earlier videos, Musk has this type of vision. So the point here is, Hobbes and this whole thing about the nominalism and all that, it's still within a Platonic answer to what the good life is. It's still a presentation of a teaching supposed to be true in a metaphysical sense. And so therefore I don't think, it's not correct and it's not sufficient for Dugin to say that Schmitt makes the move from teleology to interest. So I mean, Schmitt himself speaks totally against interest. He says interest is something going on in the economic sphere and the liberal sphere of Kaya Kallis and whatever. Somewhere in the art biennale in Venice or whatever. But it's not what's happening in the political, according to him. But why is it, why does Heidegger himself say Carl Schmitt denkt liberal? Carl Schmitt denkt liberal. Carl Schmitt thinks as a liberal. Heidegger's claim is, basically he makes it sound like liberal and metaphysicians in the old style are the same, metaphysicians which haven't awoken to the question about being. So that, the liberal teaching is a specific teaching, as we just pointed to in Locke and then in Adam Smith and in Marx, which focuses on like what Wallerstein calls the world system. And this type of factors. It just focuses on certain factors. It's like that's what grabs its attention. That's what keeps it from getting too bored. You have to tell it about interconnections, like that. What happens when some kind of commercial frigate is boarded in the Strait of Hormuz, and what happens to some local businessmen around Brussels. If you don't have a connection like that, it's not that interested in what you have to say, right? But this is a specific metaphysics. This is specific teaching. This is specific. The simplest way is it's a teaching, and it claims this is what counts as the truth, and this is what we want to hear about. So it's different in what Nietszche is facing with the whitest abyss, okay? Because that means he's aware there's all these different ways you could force people to thematize stuff and then say this is the facts. But only the count as representative facts if they're about the subject matter that these people are interested in, such as the example I just gave about Strait of Hormuz and various connections, financial connections in the world system. Let's just say something like that, not interested, because it's a specific type of thematization about what counts as the most real and the most factors we should look at. I mean, what does Aristotle say about the good life? He rather says, sort of in the way Clarence Thomas was pointing to, and I think he thought of Aristotle because he said courage is something we can practice to. And what Aristotle says is there's a specific meaning of the word courage, and it's basically like prudence, like George Bush Sr. was talking about. It wouldn't be prudent, and it means sort of you add some kind of practical sense to your otherwise daring, and then there's a mean between it somehow, and then it creates a sort of it's like the phronimos in a way. The phronimos would have prudential judgment. Socrates is supposed to be the example of the phronimos. Yeah, it produces something very specific. Aristotle has something very specific in mind, and in a way, we could say, oh, this is the first non-warrior culture, Hermes or something. Because I think Hermes, to me, is the highest production of the revelation of the Greeks, taken in the wider sense, going back into, I don't know, say 1,500 years prior to Socrates. So it's like the full scope of the Greeks, and then them coming into contact with people, other peoples that impress them, and their archaic history as a warrior people. I mean, a warrior people, it means, like for instance in the Iliad, there's all these reports about, oh, this king or whatever, Achilles was the king and Odysseus was the king, and there's all these kings under the king of kings, Agamemnon, but some of them would sometimes take a break from besieging Troy, and they would go down the coast of Anatolia, and they would go to some other city-state that had nothing to do with Troy, and they would raid it and carry off the cattle and kill the men and carry off the young women. And this is considered basically, this is the activity of Hermes, as they go around pirating, sort of. And that's normal for the warrior culture. But then you got this first picture of the right mores, the mores that without which the law would be useless, according to Aristotle, according to this Greek miracle version. But then you could see very rapidly how we get into the whitest abyss, because there's different ways that you could selectively breed a person. There's different images of what's good that suddenly crop up. The years of Lessing and Goethe produced a bourgeois version of the three. I mean, I think this is the years when the notion of the three monotheisms came into light, because before that there was Christianity claimed to be the truth and to fulfill this older religion, and then the Muslims claimed to do a better job. Muhammad claimed to give a more lucid revelation. But there wasn't the thematization of each one is equally good or something, and they're just three monotheisms. This started to get thematized in the bourgeois time, but you'd see there's this chaos of and then it's like, oh, what should a self-respecting individual believe? What should their views be? And there's this chaos. And when you start to see that, then you're sort of in this, what I'm thematizing again is the whitest abyss. And the point of Nietszche is, he doesn't just say, oh, now we'll be Hindus with European nihilism, but rather he says, yeah, we're kind of in the European nihilism. It's raging around us like a storm, but we don't give in to it. It's still sort of like this German knight, the staff is riding on a horse, and the feet of the horse are disappearing into the whitest abyss. But he still thinks absolute struggle is the best thing to do, not to sort of pretend to be in eternity and wiser and to know the truth. But so this is the problem with Dugin's position. He tries to set off absolute morals, as sort of Thomas does, to interested morals. Schmitt denies that he works with interest, and then there's certain reasons for that, but I think what they boil down to is the more one the bare admission that we don't have contact with the truth. So it's like even the Russians say that sometimes. They say, Dostoevsky, it's like maybe we don't have contact with the truth. So in a certain way, there's some contact with Christ. So because people have visions, people have some kind of relationship with Christ, etc., etc. But Christ isn't actually here. Christ isn't actually here walking amongst us in the body as he did, and therefore people like Lord Palmerston and all these guys at the beginning of the 19th century, these English aristocrats, I think Lord Chesterfield was the main one. They get this fervor for the second coming of Christ, and they start laying the seeds for the Balfour Declaration and all that. Still during the time when the Ottomans were in the region. But so Christ lives, but they want the return, because he's not actually here. So I think if one admits that the current laws always need to be changed and they need to be interpreted differently. So the one way I would put that to Dugin is, does the soldier in Ukraine kill or does he murder? Because this is a legal question. It's an ultimate question. It's a question for the church. Does he kill or does he murder? So you can't settle it by saying, let's ask a chemist. You can't settle it by saying, let's look at one of those 5 million peer-reviewed articles that came out last year. How's the matter to be settled? And isn't it that, if it's settled in terms of the Ruski Mir, if it's settled in terms of the, if the Russia did not exist, then it would be better that the world didn't exist. Then you certainly, it must be that it's not incompatible to be Orthodox Russian and to hold the Schmittian view, which is not a view simply of interest. This is so far as interest means something like a theory of values, and then somebody said that I think Hume that people have interest, but what they are is a matter of opinion. And even with respect to our own interests, we have some opinion about what our interests are. You could put it in that kind of framing, and then sort of understand it by the traditional view. But I think, I think Schmitt doesn't accept any view of the. So Schmitt repeats in the Nazi handbook for law and legislation. He repeats something like the Nietzschean language about Nutzen. It says whatever Nutzen for the Volk is Recht. But again. So one, it's sort of like, let me bookend it this way. These questions are like the questions about AI in the following sense. People keep saying, but now AI is going to be making all these life and death decisions. But it already was for 20, 30 years, because there's flight decks and air traffic control and many things. The triage on how to deploy ambulances when you have multiple emergencies in different parts of New York City or whatever. It was already deciding life and death, and not just in the way of that case of the guy that killed the exec at the company about his medical insurance or whatever it was. because they have computers making those decisions. And it's already been making these decisions for 30 years or whatever in various ways, life and death decisions. And if you could push it back, you would say, even say the case Nader took about, these people knew there was a certain percentage of a chance of a defect in a car, and then they made a calculation and said that it would be better to get hit with these lawsuits than to make a recall. Financially, it's better or whatever. So that's also like it's like an automated decision that decides human lives. And then you could say somebody at the head of the corporation had somehow presented themselves as morally willing to stand to be the face man. Here's Jamie Dimon. He'll tell you the reason why we did that, and he won't blush when he's saying it, and he won't break eye contact. So in a certain way, we're dealing with kind of people are sort of overlooking things that are very clear that they're actually doing, like that the law is constantly advancing, is constantly facing new questions, is constantly answering the question, is this killing, is this murder? Because the old prohibition prohibits murder. Thou shalt not murder. It doesn't prohibit killing, and in fact it encouraged killing because of Amalek and so on. But okay, so we're in this sort of situation where now it's not just that it's a chaos of ideas and that we're not used to them, so we're not fluent in talking about them, but it's also that there's legitimately so many paths that one could study further and ways that one could alter one's good life towards understanding. I mean, let me just end it with this, that if Benjamin Franklin were around today, how much of his daily readings would be devoted to those papers among the 5 million peer-reviewed papers that come out every year, and how much would be devoted to Cicero's answers to Platonic problems.